Yeah, what's up, everybody? It's Sergio here with 8Z Real Estate. Obviously, you guys know that. You tune into my channel. And I'm here today with my buddy, Dusty, who's a financial advisor. And so I wanted to bring him on today because a lot of my buyers and a lot of my sellers have questions about investing in real estate versus investing in 401k, how real estate is a good investment. And so who better to bring on than somebody who does this every single day? So Dusty, if you don't mind, introduce yourself.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me on. I love talking about anything that can, push our net worth up and things like that. And the best way to do that is really both ways, right? 401k and then also real estate. So, my background a little bit was I'm a Colorado native, and, my goal is always just to help people as much as possible, and whatever that might be, and answer their questions, even if it doesn't mean we end up working together. So that's, I just want people to be better off after we meet and then move on from there.
Sounds good. And something, I love that you're in this industry to help people. And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently is people are struggling right now during the pandemic, whether they have some financial hardship or if they're having some type of mental struggle. But I think within every struggle, there's some silver lining. And so one of the things that I've recognized is that because of the restrictions in the pandemic, people aren't spending a lot of money. And their savings accounts and their checkings account are actually starting to increase a little bit. So what do you think people should do right now if they're not spending a lot of money on going out to dinner or going out to travel? How do people take that money that they're saving and make sure that it's working for them?
Great question. So I think that, the main thing, right, that I talk about too is like, even as we're starting to work together with people, the first question is, how's your emergency fund? Right. So if you're in this position, in this pandemic, that you haven't lost your job, right? Use this as a reset, right? So, okay, actually no one wants to talk about it, but you got a budget, right? You got to figure out what is the income, what's going out, right? And so now that you're not just kind of spending so frivolously and you're saving, try to get to 3 to 6 months worth of savings, right? So if you lose your job, you don't have to worry about keeping the house or keep paying rent or put food on the table. So that's the first step, right? Get to that 6 months. If you're at 3, get to 6, right? If you're at 6, go to 9 if you want, right? Whatever number you're comfortable with, that's what you should do. And then the question goes, okay, or my next question would be, what's that money for, right? So now you're at 6 months, right? And now you have an extra 10, 20, 30,000, whatever it might be. Is that money going to be for a vacation once we can fly again, right? Is it going to be to do a renovation on the house? That's then, okay, if it's short term, then you probably should just keep it in cash. If it's something like, I'm just going to use this to my advantage, I don't know, this is going to be 6+ year money, that's when we can start talking about putting it into the market, because again, this is a great buying opportunity. Why is it a great buying opportunity? Because it's long-term investing, right? So today is always a good time to buy because you're not going to need it for 10, 20 years. So that's kind of how I work with people, just thinking about money and their savings.
So would you say that there's kind of a hierarchy to this, where first you want to make sure that you have that nest egg of savings, and then from there you can start to invest to make some of that money work for you?
Absolutely, right? I think that people think too much about like, hey, I want to get in the market, and you should be in the market, right? But it shouldn't, like, here's the example. If you said, hey, Dusty, I have $5,000 and I want to buy, great, right? Great investment, stuff like that. But the question is, well, what's that $5,000 for? If it's only your $5,000, that's all you have in the savings account, you probably shouldn't invest that. Now, if it's $5,000 that is on top of your emergency fund, then go get it. Like that's how that kind of works. And it's emergency fund, short-term savings, your just budget, right? Food, expenses, things like that. Once those buckets are full, that's when you start investing.
That's awesome. One of the things I think you and I have talked a lot about, and something that you just said that really kind of resonated with me, is you need to be thoughtful of how you're spending your money, right? Just because you have $5,000 doesn't mean you should invest it. And just because you qualify for a $1 million mortgage doesn't mean you should buy that home. Nor does it mean that if you have 20% to put down, that you should put 20% down. I think the holistic approach to this whole thing is kind of understanding where you are financially, understanding what your goals are, what your dreams are. Are you trying to build a real estate portfolio? Are you trying to diverse by having real estate and some type of investment through a financial advisor? And understanding that so that we as advisors can best help navigate our clients into the direction that they're trying to go based on their, their goals and their dreams. So when people come to you and they want to invest, how do you start to kind of weave in real estate as an investment? Because when you look at the people who are quote unquote the wealthiest, they have some type of real estate portfolio. And so how do you go from, your general investment to either saving money to get a down payment or to diversify into real estate? Like, how do you start to have that conversation?
So you said it, it's goals, right? What are your goals, right? So, and again, I always break it on the 5+ year and then, or the five, up to 5 years, right? Because again, that depends on what we should actually do to get to that goals. But to your point, it's like, well, do you want a mountain house? Do you want a summer house, right? Like, or do you just want to build passive income buying and renting these places? All of those things, it all comes down to what you want and what the client wants. And so, and then also where you are, right? I think that everybody, like right now, a big conversation with people our age, right? Kind of that millennial generation, they want to retire at 40, right? Like that's the number. I don't know why someone said 40, right? But they were like, that's what I want. What people don't realize is like 55 to 65 is really when you're going to make that's like your prime earning years, right?
Huh.
So yeah, and that's just because you found your career, you know how to, all the stuff that we just talked about, you're good at, right? You're not figuring out your budget anymore. You have a budget, you stick to it. You know what you can afford. You also make decisions, right? A lot of times people go, well, can I afford it? I don't know. I'll just make it work, right? At that point, you're no longer making those decisions, or you don't know, but again, you're making more money at that point. So that's where, and then you're starting to get close to, 55, 65, depending on how long you've been in your house, you're probably getting close to actually paying that off, right?
Huh.
So that's where like retiring at 40 isn't really that realistic, but that all, like I said, I kind of digress there. It's all about goals, right? And so we start there. What does that look like? And then you also said it, diversification, right? So real estate is a great method of diversification. So if you were like 05, 06, 07, if you were all in real estate or all in the stock market, you took a bath, right? Like it crushed you. But if you had done things smartly, then you probably did much better. Or if you had been leading up to that and started seeing like, hey, maybe these aren't the places I should be, and you were in cash at that point, then you could capitalize on the real estate market or the stock market at that point, right? So yeah. I see real estate as a diversification method. And I think we've talked about this too. It's the number one way to increase your net worth, right?
It's a forced savings plan, right?
Love it.
So the way I look at real estate, right? Because my dad's a financial advisor and, he's imparted a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom from when I was 16. But one of the things that he's explained to me is real estate's a forced savings plan in the sense that every month you're paying down your mortgage. But what you're really doing is every time you're paying down that mortgage, you're actually just putting money back into your own pocket. It's delayed gratification because when it comes time to sell that home, you're going to get a lot of that money back. And then on top of that, you're going to take advantage of the appreciation in the market, which is just your return on your investment. And so to me, that made a lot of sense. I'm like, oh, every month, yes, I'm paying on this home, but I'm also paying myself.
And that's such a great point, right? Like, and I'm going to kind of take that one step further, right? And because I can't disagree with anything you just said, right? And I was just kind of thinking about my own home value. And it's like, if I get anything at 6+% year over year in the stock market or in real estate, that's a pretty good return, right? Like I know that as long as I do that for the next 20+ years, I'll be able to retire pretty happy, right? Now, the flip side of that, right?
And not to mention interest rates are below 3%. So it's basically free money.
100% free money, right? And
let's make that clear.
and that's the thing, right? And actually that's a question I'd have for you. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to ask you a question, right? Okay. When do you think and this might be for a mortgage broker, but that's okay. But like, when do you think is a point to refi, right? Like if you're 15 years into the mortgage, even if you're getting a 2%, right? Is it worth to refi at that point? There's
so many contributing factors to that, right? What are you trying to do with that money? Are you just trying to lower your payment? That may not make any sense. Are you trying to take that money out and pay for your kids' college tuition? Well, that might make a lot of sense. And so I think it's really understanding, well, what is the purpose of the refi? Is it to save a couple $100? Let's maybe reconsider that. Oh, you need that money to do some projects around the home because you want to sell the house and buy your dream home? Well, then yeah, that might make a lot of sense. And so I think I can't give you a templated answer, because just like everybody else, when it comes time to buying a home, it's a case by case basis. And the real question is, what are you trying to do with that money?
I love that, right? Goal-based, right?
Yeah.
And so where I was also going with the idea of that forced savings plan, and as it grows, right? People see the house as an asset, right? You live there. And if it's a real estate portfolio, then other people live there, right? So you can see and hold, or not hold it, but you can see this asset, right? But people don't, for whatever reason, they don't see the same thing when we're talking about equities, right? You own a part of that company. So I ask you, if your house drops by 25%, are you going to sell the house? No, right?
Unless I have to.
Right. That makes sense, right? But most people don't have to, right? But when we go to equities, people see that 25% pullback. They're like, let's sell it, right? It's no longer any good. Well, no, right? The roof is still there. It's still protecting us from the winter, right? So we need to make, that's where I think that real estate and stock market are really go hand in hand. And it's just a way to continue to grow your net worth.
Yeah. And I mean, no offense, equities and investing is boring as shit, right? And the reason it's so boring is because there's nothing tangible. And so I think why investing in real estate and why people are more likely to hold on to it is because that's a tangible asset that you have, that you see every single day. Checking your phone to check the valuation of a stock or how it did that day, you're removed from the actual performance of it. It's just a number on a page. And so I think a lot of people overreact and make a decision based on a short-term piece of data. Whereas with a home, right, you have some emotional attachment to it. You go see it every day and you can actually see it and hold it. And so I think it's a lot easier for people to want to hold on to a real estate investment than it is for them to want to hold on to some type of stock or equity investment, because there's no real relationship there.
Fair enough. No, I think that's a good call, right?
Not to knock you, but I think that's how a lot of myself included, millennials feel about investing. It's like I get it, and I understand that it's a diversification of a portfolio, but I want something that I can see, because there's a lot of distrust in Wall Street, which is unfortunate.
And I can understand why, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so many of the stories and stuff like that, but I also think that if you're smart with it, right? And look, like if we're talking about a 401k, right? Like there's different levels of investing, right?
Yeah.
Like we're talking about the most complicated version, which is equities, right? Where you're betting on that company, whatever that company is going to do better in the next 20 years, right? Most of us though are going to be investing in our 401k, right? Which is a company plan that's set up, and you have a selection of 10 to 15 different mutual funds. The way I describe mutual funds is, they have lifeguards, right? It's a pool of investments, right? And these lifeguards are watching out over these different individual swimmers, right? To make sure they can, right?
Yeah.
So it's a safer way, right? To invest in the market and grow your net worth. But, the cool part too is like they're really good mutual funds, right? Because again, they're the big fund companies. There's 10 to 15 of them, and most of them actually are like set it and forget it these days, right?
I was just thinking that. What was that infomercial where they're like, set it and forget it? Like, that's what I want with everything. I want the easy button. Like, tell me what to invest in. This is going to be your general return. I want to do that, and I don't want to touch it at all. Just let it go. Like, it's set it and forget it.
Right, and that's just how it is now, right? With these life cycle funds, right? You and I, right, talk a lot about kind of the TSP and everything like that. They have a lot of life cycle funds that, hey, you're going to retire at 2050, right? So you put money in every month, and it automatically rebalances to more conservative as you get closer to your retirement age. You literally don't have to do anything except for put money in. That's all you have to do.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like a simple way to do it, right? For those of people who want the easy button. And the great part about that too is like you also have the ability to have more control, but you just have to monitor it yourself, and you become one of those lifeguards that's monitoring the pool.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And it comes back to the forced savings, right? Like that's why 401ks, like ultimately you still have to choose to pay your mortgage, right? Like if you don't pay it, you're going to get, kicked out of your house, right? But you still have to choose to do that. Well, same thing, you have to choose to put in that 3%, 6% or whatever into your 401k every paycheck. But you really, once you get into the habit, you don't notice it.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just part of your budget and then it's continuing to grow, right? Dollar cost averaging is the best way to invest, right? Which the idea is you're always putting money in on a regular basis, a systematic basis. Some days you're going to buy high, some days you're going to buy low, but over the long term, you're going to have a lower, buy price because you're always doing it. Plus it's growing every time you buy.
Yeah. Interesting. I want to come back to something that you said earlier about, what did you say, 50 to 65 or is your prime earning years?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about that. Like, is there like a number or like a percentage of like how much more you're earning in those years versus your 20s and 30s? And I know it's going to be career dependent.
I think it's just the idea that, and you know what, I might be totally making this up, right? I've just seen that as people, right? Like I'm a big planner, right? And that's what I do with all my clients is I plug them into the plan. And what I've found is if you retire at 55, let's say you're putting X money away at 50 or 55, you're going to have 700,000, right? That's a pretty good chunk of change to retire on, depending on your spending, right? It all comes into what you're spending. Then if I said, okay, now that same individual, I don't change anything, but then I go, hey, let's retire 10 years later, right? Let's retire at 65 now. Now that 700,000 is 2.1 million, right, at retirement. And so versus the 700,000. So again, it's time in the market, but you're more settled, right? Think about it, right? Where a lot of 25 to 30, you're figuring it out, right? 30 to 40, that might be when you figured it out and go, I don't like this job, I'm going to change a career, right? Most people though, if you're kind of in that career space, 40, 50, 60, you're like in your career. And then the idea is then your income is going up, 3% a year or something like that. So that's kind of the idea, right? Now, if you're changing careers every 5 years, then there probably isn't an earning change there because you just keep changing careers.
Yeah. Interesting. And I think I'm curious to see how things like that data point itself changes because people don't want to stay in the same career for their entire lives. And I would say most people start to try more things and really bounce. And I would like to see how long or when that new 50-year-old timeframe starts, right? Because with all the things that we have availability to and our accessibility to information and education gives us a lot of opportunity. And so we can constantly, change and reinvent ourselves and try something new. So I'm curious to see if those still stay as your maximum earning years, or if that gets adjusted with the new generation that's coming up and how they start to operate.
Yeah. And I think that, to that point, right, it comes to savings, right? Like if you're really good at savings, then you're going to have more flexibility, right? Because then you're not, I can't remember who talks about this, but it might be like Gary Vee or something like that, right? Where when you start buying houses or a house that you can't afford, then now you have responsibility, right? If you have kids before you're ready, right? Now you're kind of tied down and then you don't have the flexibility to change jobs, right? And so again, it all comes down to just preparedness and what are your goals and are you sticking to them, right? I think that you and I would agree that accountability with ourselves and our clients is the number one thing, right? Like what you said you're going to do, I'm going to hold you to it, right? And because that's how we're going to get to, whatever, point, from point A to point B.
Yeah. As Jay-Z said, or at least I saw a quote the other day, he said, if you can't afford it twice, you can't afford it.
Yep. Love it.
I loved it. Cool, Dusty. Trying to think, is there anything else that, that we haven't talked about that you wanted to chat through?
No, I think again I should talk to your dad, right? Because I had never heard of the forced or seeing a mortgage as a forced savings plan. And I think that's really spurred this whole thing, right? It was like, no, that is the number one thing. Like there's some of us that are very good at saving, right? Mm-hmm. And like I said, there's 4 different buckets, right? The emergency fund, short-term savings, your expenses, and then investing. Some people are really good at that. But most of us just need to be forced saving that, hey, 6% a paycheck is going into something, right? And then I just like that, right? Because it continues to force people to think for the future, right? Because a lot of us are living, we should live in the moment, but we more than likely are gonna, so another number I'll throw out to you, right, is if you're married and you both live to 60, more than likely, like a 90% chance, one of you is gonna live past 90, okay? So even though we wanna spend all the money now, right, I joked, right, I still laugh at myself that I was saying this in like high school and college, like whoever dies with the most toys wins. It's probably not true, right? Because those people that have the most toys might not actually be able to afford to live their entire life, right? So I think that we have to just look at everything and live within our means, right? I think that that's something that you and I see eye to eye with is like, cool, can you get approved for X amount? Awesome, but should you do that, right? What kind of flexibility is that gonna have, right? If you don't travel and you wanna have the house that you wanna have, great. But if you wanna travel, then you probably should, not spend as much as you are, actually approved for.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions that I always ask my clients is, what do you want your lifestyle to look like? And the reason I ask that is it gives me a little bit of information about, well, do they want to do yard work on the weekend, or do they want to have somebody else that's going to take care of that? Townhome versus a single family home. What do you enjoy doing? And if it's these activities that require travel or are expensive, well, then we need to have a conversation about, well, let's make sure that we stay within your budget so that your lifestyle isn't drastically changed when you buy a home. And I think that's a really important part of that. You talk about how some people struggle with savings. And one of the things that my dad taught me from when I was a kid was, if you have a budget and it's automatically taken out and you don't have to think about it, right? That's one less thing that you have to take care of. And I think when we're able to set up systems and structure around creating a savings plan for ourselves, whether that's for a down payment or to help pay off student loans or to travel the world, when we can have structure around a savings plan and we don't have to think about it because that comes out of our paycheck every month or every 2 weeks, it makes it a lot easier. And when you look up in 2 to 3 years and you check your savings account, you'll see all of the work that you put in, but you didn't actually have to do any work except for that initial setup. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. And yeah, as I was listening to that, I was thinking about decision-making, right? Like if you have the choice and you said delayed gratification, right? Which is the same thing, right? It's like, I had that conversation, right, the other day, like, do you want to buy the $50 pair of shoes or do you want to retire at 60? Right now, I was talking to right? Come on, dude, I want both. And my point is, like, you probably could afford both, right? But if we're talking about the same $50 that's going to go into your Roth or buy a new pair of shoes, like those are the decisions you have to make. And, we don't want to, it's adulting, right? We got to make adult decisions. But to your point, if you're going, hey, $50 automatically goes to my Roth, $50 automatically goes to my savings account, right? My short-term savings. And then, hey, I'm putting 6% into the, my 401k or whatever that might be, my pre-tax stuff, then it's automatic and you just do it. And the other thing that, a couple things actually. One, if your company has a 401k, whatever level you need to get to, so they match, do that. We were talking about free money, right? Where the interest rates are so low right now, free money. Same thing. If you got to put 6% in your 401k, so your company matches 3, do it, right? Don't overthink it. Just get into that habit. Because again, 6% of 100k, right, it automatically grows as you get, increase, right? So you're never really going to see it. So I think that that's huge. And then, going back to the decision-making piece, right? Like automate our lives, like get into a place that this stuff just automatically comes out and you don't pay attention to it. And you said it, save, or I'm going to kind of reiterate it. Save first, spend second. Most of us spend first, save second. And that latter, right? That second one, we never have enough money to save.
Yeah. I love that. Right. You said 2 really important things there. I had an instructor at the Air Force Academy that said, life is about choices and choices have consequences. So you can either choose to live a life where you're going to save and prepare for the future and enjoy your current life, or you can choose to not do any of that and you're going to live a really hard life, which kind of leads me into the next point is hard decisions make an easy life. easy decisions make for a hard life. So you got to figure out like what is important to you and what you want to do, and balance your lifestyle with your goals. And I think that's how you figure out how much you want to save and prepare for the future.
Yeah, I love Jersey, right? That's such a great quote. Like that was something I play over in my head a lot, right? Yeah. And again, like to your point, we want the easy button, but is that really worthwhile and things like that? And so, a big conversation that we've been having this whole time is goals, right? And what do you want, right? I know that you set goals and I've tried to replicate my goal setting based on some of the stuff that you've talked about, just because I think that gets lost, right? It's like, okay, well, where do I want to be in 3 years? Where do I want to be in 5 years? That's a big, long time. And there's a lot of life that happens in between now and 5 years from now, right? So do you still do kind of the quarterly goals, right? That break down to daily goals? Is that something that you're still doing?
So the way I've done it and the way that was taught to me is I have a 3-year vision of where I want to be, a 1-year plan, 90-day goals, and then weekly activities. And so what that allows me to do is I know where I want to be in 3 years, professionally, personally, you name it, you can insert some other goals in there. I know what I have to accomplish in the next year to achieve that first year of my 3-year plan. And then I know what I have to do quarterly to achieve that 1-year plan. And then I have like a sticky that I know that if I achieve these weekly goals, that will lead me to my quarterly goals. And then it all kind of ripples and leads up to that 3-year vision. And so is it super calculated? No. Do I try and revisit this on an annual basis? Absolutely. Do I fail? More times than not. But at least I know that I have a North Star and I'm going somewhere. And I'm not just like floundering through life. Like at least I have a general direction, and that quarterly check-in allows me to make sure that I'm on the right path. And if I'm not on the right path, it's a lane correction, not a course correction.
Yeah. And I think that's something I started doing, right? Sticky note, right? Like it's so funny. Like I'm so into tech and everything like that, but I still just use sticky notes. And I've started doing this where before I leave, right, end of the day, I write out and go, okay, what do I have to do tomorrow? Right? So what are my to-do tasks, right? How many of those do I have? Okay, I got 5 or 7 of those, and I just put little dashes. And this comes, I don't know if we've talked about this, but it comes from the days of many, many years ago when I was following Arnold Schwarzenegger's weightlifting plan. And this way long ago, never really worked out, but I didn't use drugs like he did. But he would like, let's say he had 20 sets that he had to do.
Yeah.
And he'd draw them up there, right? Like on a whiteboard or a sticky note. And every set he would make a cross, right? So by the end, he'd have 20 X's. So I started doing that with every activity that I need to do, because, I always say that good things happen, right, when I pick up the phone. So it's one of those things where I just go, okay, and I do this the day before. So I walk in and go, okay, hey, I know I have to make 50 calls today. Or, hey, I know I need to make, send these 20 emails or whatever it might be. And then to your point, it's a leading indicator. Right? So I know if I'm doing these things every single day, that then the quarterly goals, the yearly goals, all of those things will happen because I'm in it in the moment during that day.
Yeah, I think it's just having that focus, because when you don't have that focus, you start to drift. And I think drift is one of the biggest reasons we don't accomplish our goals. And so just having some general idea of what you're going to focus on, and as they say, what you focus on expands, right? It's just knowing that you're checking in every single day. Right? And that check-in just allows you to make sure that you're aligned, that you're still aligned, and then you know what you need to do to take action. And that's the biggest part. It's like you can have all the goals in the world, but if you don't have actionable steps to get there, it doesn't mean shit.
I love that. And one more thing on goals, because I don't know how everybody nerds out on goals like you and I do. But how big, right? Because I've had goals, and I always kind of look back and like weights I want to hit on the bar, right? For weightlifting and things like that. And I eventually get there. It's never really the deadline, right? What I found though, is when I threw out huge goals that scare the crap out of me, then and go, there's no way I can do this. I'm much more dedicated day in, day out. How do you feel about that?
I'm the opposite way. I need to know that I can achieve something, and then I usually try and blow it out of the water. Okay. I'm different. Or maybe I think the other part, and I struggle with this, is I don't know how to dream very big, right? Like I've never been a flashy person. I've never been somebody who, has had big dreams. I just know that I like to accomplish things. And so that's something I struggle with. So I'm not the best person on that one, because like I set goals and then every year I end up beating them, which means my goals are too small.
And yeah, it was for me, right? I just noticed that like the small goals didn't motivate me for the daily stuff as the goals that like scare the crap out of me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, each their own.
And I think it's depending on who you talk to, right? Like, actually, it's not dependent on who you talk to. Everybody says that you should have bigger goals, and if you fall short of them, that's better than having smaller goals and not, meeting your potential. So, I don't know. I'm still on the fence about that, but right. I know any of my mentors would be like, you need to have bigger goals. So,
I love it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, Dusty. I'm sure this is going to be the first of many. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
So, right, easy is just LinkedIn, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's how we met, right?
Yeah.
It's just connecting on LinkedIn. There's not too many Dusty DeGroffs out there. So you just go, if you're in kind of, in Denver, right? You Google my name, then you'll be able to find me that way. But LinkedIn is probably the best way.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and I'll tag you in some of these posts so that people know how to find you. But it's been great, and looking forward to the next one already.
I love it, man. I appreciate it. And this is always fun.
Thanks, Dusty.